Welcome back to the channel, and on this video I'm going to look at England's Six Nations training squad, which Steve Borthwick is going to announce in a couple of days. I'm going to look at the potential new faces that we should see and maybe you want to see in the squad. I'm going to give my predictions of what Steve Borthwick will do, the players that I would like to see added to a wider training squad before he narrows it down for the Six Nations tournament, and a potential team that could be taking the field to play against Italy. On this video specifically looking at the forwards. And well, what I'll do is I'll start with the players that were in the England squad at the Rugby World Cup, decide whether any of those should be culled or aren't available anymore, which is the case for quite a few, and then look at the new faces. And starting with loose head prop, and the three that went to the Rugby World Cup were Ellis Gens, were Joe Marler, were Bevan Rodd, and personally quite happy with all of those. I quite like the balance across the scrum. I think England's scrummaging issues were slightly exposed at the World Cup. Joe Marler definitely solidifies that. If he's up for still playing international rugby, I'm not bothered that he may not be available at the next World Cup. I want to win Test match rugby right now. And he showed in that semi-final against South Africa what he is made of. Bevan Rodd potentially is on the fringe, could be replaced by someone. I'll come to that in a minute. But because this is a wider training squad, the World Cup squad was 34 men. Or 33, was it? 33. And I'm expecting this training squad to be around about 45. So I think there's space for 4 loose head props in the squad. And on that basis, the player I would like to see added to the group would be Beno Obano, who's playing brilliantly for Bath, has represented England before, but looks like he's taken his game on to another level. So that's loose head prop. Hooker, Jamie George, Theo Dan, Jack Walker went to the World Cup. I'm going to eliminate Jack Walker from the squad. Now, that's not because I don't think he's a good player. He's a very good Premiership player, really good pro. But clearly Steve Borthwick does not trust him at the highest level, barely gave him any minutes. And if Luke Cowan-Dickie was fit, I don't believe Jack Walker would have gone to the Rugby World Cup. Theo Dan looks like he's got something about him, although I think there's a lot to do for him to bridge the gap between him and Jamie George, who is and was at the World Cup England's really only high-quality hooker, and he's an exceptional rugby player. The players that I would like to see added, Luke Cowan-Dickie in for Jack Walker. And if we're having a fourth hooker, which maybe there will be, I mean, I'd be quite happy if it was George McGuigan or Jamie Blamire or someone like that. I just love Harry Thacker. So I'm going to speak up for him now. This won't happen. Steve Borthwick will not pick Harry Thacker. He keeps getting accused of being too small. I get scrummaging is important. And you look at guys like Malcolm Marks, Bongi and Banambi, Cody Taylor, Piato Malvaca, Marchand and the like. They're all big men. Harry Thacker is a different shape, but I like celebrating players for what they can do, not worrying about what they're not able to do. And he's been a brilliant player, and I'd love to see him recognised. We'll see. I don't expect it to happen. Tell me what you think. And while you're there, in the comments, if you get value from the channel, I would love it if I haven't already, if I earn your subscription. Tight head prop. Dan Cole, Carl Sinclair and Will Stewart went to the World Cup. We saw at the World Cup, again, touching on the scrummaging being an issue, that Dan Cole, despite being, comfortably the oldest of all these players, is the most able to play at international rugby and do the basics well, the scrum. He was brilliant in that semi-final. The other players, some way off. And I think with Will Stewart, and I think to a lesser degree with Kyle Sinclair, they just blow hot and cold. They can have a great game, and then they'll have an absolute stinker. And you cannot have that with players like this. Franz Malherbe, for example, you know exactly what you're going to get from him. No wonder he's a world champion 2 times over. He's just metronomically solid, and I crave that for England. And whilst there isn't anyone doing that job, Dan Cole, keep playing. If he wants to keep playing, I'd keep picking him. And I wouldn't worry too much about 4 years' time right now, because there are players that can develop into that role. But we need some solid foundations in the meantime. And the players that I think can grow into that role, tell me what you think, Joe Hayes and Asher Opoku Fajor. Now, Joe Hayes has been around the England squad before. He's got Test match rugby, and he's always looked to me like he's about to become the real deal. I do feel like he's genuinely about to become the real deal. He's looked really solid at set piece for Leicester, and we'll see how he goes on in these European matches again in a couple of weeks' time, up against some tough opposition. Hopefully he can prove it. I think he may well be closing that gap to Dan Cole, his club mate at Leicester Tigers, who he shares the game time with in the tight head prop position. I'm optimistic. And Asher Opoku Fajor, long-term prospect, I'm very, very optimistic. He's been dynamite in the Premiership this season for Sale. And I've got to credit Wasps for developing him, because Wasps went bust. They lost their whole squad. Sale picked up this young man, and well, they've done very well to secure his services. But fair play to Wasps for developing this talent. And I'm actually going to say, maybe he should be in Steve Borthwick's squad, but only as like an apprentice. I don't think Asher Opoku Fajor is going to get any game time, or should get any game time in the Six Nations, or even in the summer internationals in the summer. Let's let him bed in the Premiership. But fine, get him around the environment if that would be a beneficial thing to do. Joe Hayes is the one in the short term I think he's got more potential. Second row, love that little combination of locks. Look good at the World Cup, all of them. It's a shame we don't have Dave Ribbons because he's now playing in France. The other three, I think, are comfortably England's best three options. And I think there's a bit of a drop-off to the next one. Not a problem position as such, but I just don't think there's anyone that's automatically saying Dave Ribbons' spot is mine. And consequently, there's a few that I would want to have a look at in this Six Nations training squad. And there's a bunch of them you could select. Hugh Tizard and Nick Ezekwe at Saracens. Different players look very good. Ezekwe currently injured, but when he is fit, he seems to have been the guy that gets picked with Maro Itoje. At Northampton, Alex Moon and Alex Coles make a really nice combination, tight head and loose head lock. Moon just a big lump. Alex Coles a real athlete. And Joe Launchbury has been there and done it. Back in England now playing at Quins. Doesn't quite feel like he's back to where he was. So on the basis of what I've seen this season, and tell me if you disagree, the ones that I would pick to go into an England squad to try and one of them take the spot of Dave Ribbons moving forward would be Nick Ezekwe, Alex Moon, Alex Coles. That's my thoughts. I'd love to know what you think. I mean, interestingly, Chunga Munya at Northampton Saints seems to be getting quite a bit of game time as well. So, but the two guys at Saints I really like. Nick Ezekwe, I think, is a really good player. Back row. And you look at those names and you straight away realise how many players are now unavailable to England. Tom Curry, Courtney Lawes, Jack Willis. Jack Willis because he's in France, Tom Curry because he's injured, and Courtney Lawes because he has retired from international rugby. Courtney, reconsider. You'd be England captain, you are England's best player. Please don't stop playing. I don't expect Courtney Lawes to listen to me and to change his mind, but I wish he would. I really wish he would. He keeps getting better and better. It's like a fine wine, Courtney Lawes. But no, we don't have him. And I'm also going to say, Billy Vunipola demonstrated at the Rugby World Cup, whilst he's been a great servant for England and for Saracens, he's not at the elite level now, to the point that I think I said it in the video after the semi-final, or it was after the third, fourth place playoff when Sam Underhill was the man of the match. I couldn't help but think if Sam Underhill had been on the bench in that World Cup semi-final and not Billy Vunipola, England may well have got themselves to a World Cup final. Sounds harsh? Maybe. But those are the three guys that I would keep in a Six Nations training squad, meaning and that wouldn't be a bad back row. I'd be quite happy if it was Ludlam, Underhill, Earl. That could well be a starting back row for England. England do have an issue in the blindside position. There is no real like-for-like replacement for Courtney Lawes. Are they going to go with Ollie Chesham or George Martin on the blindside flank? That's a possibility as well. I don't know where you look. There's a load of options, and here we go. So there you go. So many options. I can't even fit them all on the page. Tom Pearson, Chandler Cunningham himself, Will Evans, Ben Curry, Zach Mercer, Tom Willis, Alfie Barbary, Alex Dombrandt. If you had to pick a handful of those, which ones would you go with? Because the ones that I've selected are those guys. Now, Tom Pearson hasn't been automatically starting or indeed playing that well for Northampton Saints. I do think he is a potential test match animal. It's quite early days in his career, so I'm not suggesting he'll get much game time in the Six Nations. I'm just very optimistic about him in the longer term. Ben Curry, I do think, is the next cab off the rank, with his brother being injured. Everyone, I live in Manchester, everyone at Sale Sharks up the road rave about him. And, well, he is genetically identical, so he should be able to fill the void a little bit. But Will Evans in that 7 position has been outstanding for Harlequins, and a little bit like Harry Thacker, he's sometimes been overlooked because he's quite small. I think he's defied his critics, and I think he deserves to be at least brought into the wider conversation of a training squad. Whether he makes the leap to the actual test match side, I think that's a big step, but he's been playing brilliantly. And in terms of the number 8 position, Alfie Barbary has just got so much potential upside. Every time he gets to a new level of playing, he seems to match it and do really well. if he can stay fit still with Bath, then I think he's got to be considered, because yeah, he just is a bit of a difference maker, and in a very different way I think Zach Mercer has a point of difference that could be really valuable on the international stage. So those are the guys that I would include. Tell me if you disagree. Maybe you think Alex Donbrandt over Zach Mercer. Maybe you think someone completely different. Maybe you think Tom Pearson does not deserve his place, despite the fact I've acknowledged he's not necessarily playing as well as he did last season for London Irish. But tell me what you think in the comments. And as I say, if you get value from the channel, hit subscribe and give the video a thumbs up. So that would make, if I jump myself out of the way, that would make my England training squad 26 players I've got in the forward pack. I'll do another video on the backs where I will have 19 backs. But I think there are some big issues, big issues that need to be solved for England in every single one of those areas in the pack. And that's why I've got a large number of players, 26, that I would want to have a look at if I was Steve Borthwick. And tell me what you think about those. Any you disagree with? Any you agree with? I don't expect Harry Thacker to be one of the hookers. I just would. But is there someone like that for you? Other people overlook or underrate, you feel, and you would actually have them involved? Just leaping forward to the first game of the Six Nations against Italy in Rome. And that is what I would predict would be England's starting pack. I mean, he could go with the 2 sevens as the flankers, or Lewis Ludlam would do a job on the blindside flank. I could definitely see that happening. But my best guess would be that George Martin and Maro Itoje will be locks, and Ollie Chesham will try his very best to fill the Courtney Lawes role on the blindside flank. The thing is, it's interesting. So George Martin and Ollie Chesham are both fantastic players, and they both fit some of the elements of what Courtney Lawes does. They just don't tick all of the boxes. Courtney Lawes is that good. So anyway, there's my thoughts on the Six Nations training squad. We'll get that in a couple of days' time, and on what I think it might look like when you get to an actual test match against Italy. Anyone I've missed? Anyone you disagree with? Anyone you really want to passionately stick up for? Get stuck in the comments, like, subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.